It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood. Would you be mine? Would you be mine? It's a neighborly day.
Yo, what up, what up? This is your boy JD Jones, and I'm one of your hosts for Neighborhood Talk.
And I'm your other host, Mocca on the block.
Hey, Mocha, how you doing over there this afternoon?
Doing good, man. Finally back from my trip from Florida. Feeling
You know,
better.
on the road, getting through it. I know I respect it. But here at Neighborhood Talk, we want to welcome all of our listeners and supporters around the world. But allow me to introduce ourselves. We are the newest, latest, and soon-to-be most influential Web3 platform to ever exist. Yo, not only is this our space to display our newest and latest projects, such as Neighborhood Tales, but we're going to share our space with the dopest guests, and tonight is no exception. Mocha, please let our listeners and our neighbors know who we have the privilege of hosting today.
Yes, like my pleasure. So we have the pleasure of hosting lead advisor Verus, Nicholas Lyons. So can you please introduce yourself to our audience and let us know a little bit more about you?
Hi, I'm Nick. I'm English, as you can hear, but I was living the last 10 years in America. I am currently in France, so really enjoying the decentralized world. And my background is that I was originally a banker, a merchant banker, an investment banker, and I raised about $92 billion for about 500 different corporations during the 90s, and then about $6 billion for private equity and hedge funds and real estate funds, and that was in my prior life. And then I got involved in systematic trading and machine learning and using mathematics to trade markets, and ran a what's known as a systematic CTA, which is using advanced algorithms to learn everything that you can about markets and trade those markets. And then in 2007, I got into the world of cryptography, pre-Bitcoin, or as Satoshi says, in the design phase of Bitcoin. And then I've spent the last, whatever it is now, 14, 15 years being in the decentralized world. And since 2018, I've been a community member and an advisor to Verus.io, which is the evolution of Bitcoin and an enabling architecture that brings security, identity, decentralized exchanges, and peer-to-peer NFT marketplace, and the ability for anybody to spin up their own public blockchain, private blockchain, community currency, social token, etc. And it's all community-based. It's not owned by a corporation. We didn't do any VC funding. We didn't do any ICOs. It was very similar to Bitcoin. There was a fair mine and a fair launch. And this enables a true public technology that we believe is going to be the internet that really enables and empowers all of us to make the internet that we should have had before it was taken over by surveillance capitalists and surveillance states that want to own everything that you know and everything that you should rightfully own. So we believe in what is going to be the future, which is a digital declaration of independence, where the Declaration of Independence that is currently no longer true, which starts out, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Well, there aren't any self-evident truths anymore because all the data is held by corporations and governments, and we want to see that transfer back to the people so we can build a new improved internet that's owned of, by, and for the people. So that's the mission, and we've been on this road a long time, and we're very close to delivering all of that technology that will be free, open source software that can be owned of, by, and for the people.
Yo, Nick, that's an awesome introduction of yourself, your mission, your projects. We're excited to have you here at Neighborhood Talk, and your resume and your accomplishments, they 100% precede you, and we're excited to have you. But can you talk to our listeners and our neighbors about what Verus is about and how did you even get involved with it?
Yeah, sure. So Verus was launched on the 21st of May 2018, and it was announced in the Bitcoin talk, which gave everybody the chance to start mining and participating in it from the very beginning. And it was founded by a group of like-minded people who had, deep technology skills, and is led by a man by the name of Mike Tutongi. And Mike is one of the most impressive technologists that I've ever had the privilege to work with. And his background is he was the original architect of Windows 95 kernel, and what makes what brought in the really the age of computing, and sort of a landmark in computing history. And then he ran the Java project for Microsoft, and then went on to run eHome and wrote the Windows Media Player. And then he was one of the two founders of .NET, which is, as you know, the largest application, or corporate application, basically protocol that he founded and was the lead on. And then he went away and built his own social media business that he was acquired in order that they could bring him back to Microsoft, and where he became the technical fellow. So in Microsoft's history, there have been, I think, 22 technical fellows. They are geniuses, acknowledged geniuses, and they have like superpowers, I think is the way to think of them, in terms of what they can do with their knowledge. And especially for someone like Mike, who's got low-level assembly language expertise at the CPU, and a level of experience with scaling systems. Some of the biggest problems with Web3 and decentralization and distribution is that you need to be extremely adept at understanding all of the computing paradigms that we live within. And so they brought him back as the technical fellow in advertising. And of course, advertising is all about knowing as much as you possibly can about the user, so that you can provide them with the most valuable information at exactly the right moment, in order that they can be monetized. And it was obviously in this final role where the lights went on. I mean, I'm sure he understood the importance of identity from the beginning of the 90s, but it was really seeing how totally all-consuming and how much information is owned and controlled by the well, I call them the technocracy, which is Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Facebook, how much they know about all of us, and what the incoming power of machine learning is, and what all of those data lakes mean for our freedom, etc. And so Mike is the lead developer for Verus, and Verus is built on, you can think of four major, four pillars. And those four pillars are security, and that's obviously what the blockchain itself enables, and that's called the consensus mechanism. And we have a new consensus mechanism that is 50% proof of work. That's like Bitcoin using proof of work, and currently Ethereum is using proof of work, but it's moving to proof of stake. And in our consensus mechanism, it's 50% proof of work, 50% proof of stake, and it is optimized for the CPU because of Mike's knowledge and his background. He effectively reverse engineered the proof of work to be best achieved by a CPU and equalized against GPUs and FPGAs. So, you've obviously often heard people criticize proof of work by saying, well, whoever's got the most money can buy the most powerful ASICs. And so it's the same as proof of stake because, the person with the most money controls the most power in the consensus mechanism, etc. Well, Mike, given his genius in the engineering, created a 51% hash attack resistant new proof that's called a proof of power that, like I said, is 50% proof of work, 50% proof of stake. That's pillar one. Pillar two is that apart from this new layer one capability from a security perspective, we also have the ability to have identities at the base layer. So that's the second pillar. And the reason why you need identities at the base layer is that there are many things that when you want to build all of these wonderful things that we want in the metaverse, that would be far better achieved by enabling you to have smart transactions that use an identity rather than smart contracts that potentially pose a risk to you. And that's where we've seen billions of dollars of hacks and rug pulls and all of those things. So you needed to bring identity onto the base protocol so that you would be able to be self-sovereign and own your name and own your identity. Because if you have identity on layer two, there has to be a business model. And that business model means just like Google and Apple own your Apple ID, you may have an Apple ID, but you don't own it. They've issued it to you. So you need identity to be self-sovereign. You need to have your own identity that is issued directly from a blockchain. And then that identity needs to have some special features. And the special features that we've evolved is that you can revoke and recover that identity autonomously. So you have the ability to protect yourself and to never lose your private key. So everyone's heard about these stories about people losing their private keys and losing their money, etc., etc. This solves that problem. So you have the ability to issue, revoke, and recover that identity autonomously. And you can buy that directly from the blockchain. So it's not like ENS or unstoppable domains or Handshake. These are all, really DNS style models where you're really renting those IDs, and there's still someone who can potentially, deplatform you. This identity that you receive on Verus means that you can never be deplatformed because you own that ID and you don't have to pay rent on it. You buy it once, and then you have the superpowers that come from that identity. And that identity is unique. So you could think of it as a superpowered NFT, because at the end of the day, an NFT is just an ID, but it's an ID that's really a dumb ID rather than a smart ID, because it doesn't have composable powers. The NFT, a 721 and even a 1155 doesn't have true composability, and it doesn't have self-sovereignty, etc. So identity is the second pillar, and inside of identity, we also added the capability of adding vaults as well, so that you can make sure that you can keep your money safe, and that vault is time locked, so that you can decide, just like you might have money that you have in your, when you're walking around the city, and you might have, $10 in your pocket in case, someone comes and tries to mug you, whatever, and you'd have at risk only the cash that you have on you, but your money in your bank is safe because they can't access the bank. So you can think of a vault as being somewhat similar, but these vaults are time locked so that you have enough time to be able to, if someone, even if they came up to you with a gun and they said, give me your private key and give me your money, and they were to take your private key, you would have a time lock that would enable you to revoke and recover your primary ID, so you would never lose your information, you'd never lose your data, you never lose that money. So you have vaults built in, and also the vaults enable you to do vesting schedules. So, when you have a project, the starting team that you have may well, not follow through on the things that you want them to do. So part of, the benefit of having vaults is you can have a vesting schedule so that, if you've agreed to do a coin, for someone to receive certain coins, if they do certain things, then you have the ability to vest those, and you can see the same benefits would accrue for wills, etc. So if God forbid someone died, you don't want to have the risk that you lose all of the value that you've created. You want to be able to revoke that ID and recover that ID, and you would want to be able to enable your inheritors or your family or your friends or your wife or your girlfriend to be able to access those funds. And so you can have now write a will where you can have the ability for someone to inherit all of the valuable stuff that you've built in the metaverse, etc. So that's pillar 2 is identity. Pillar 3 is obviously decentralized exchange. So once you have, the other thing about identity is you have friendly names. So you don't have to deal with complicated hexadecimal addresses, OX, XYZ, 4, et cetera, et cetera. You can just have a friendly name. So you could be Mocca at, or JD at, or, I'm Nicholas at. And so that would enable me sending without it being, like Venmo, without it being like, Apple Pay, as I can send from Nicholas at to Mocca at, and that money goes direct and it's peer-to-peer, and the cost of doing that is 0.025% aside. So it's extremely low cost, it's peer-to-peer. That means that it's fully self-sovereign, it's fully, basically self-custodial. So you are able to effect transfers between each other, and that could be of any form of value. It could be USDC, it could be Bitcoin, it could be even Ethereum, even it could be any thing of value, or any form of NFT as well. So that's the third pillar, is that you would want to be able to, if you were walking around the metaverse and you had this cool pair of, let's say, digital Yeezys, or some cool jacket that, I don't know, that your avatar is wearing, you would want to be able to bump into that person and be able to exchange that peer. You don't have to go to OpenSea or Rarible or go off platform. You want to be able to exchange that, just directly, as if you were meeting someone in the real world and you're saying, oh, I love that, I want to buy that jacket from you, and you could buy it. And that you'd also want to make sure that, of course, that was the real jacket, wasn't a fake jacket, etc. All of which, you can do using the various platforms. So the third pillar is decentralized exchange. So you don't need Coinbase, you don't need any of those other centralized systems. This is all decentralized, all peer-to-peer, and that enables you to exchange anything of value. And so that's all through API technology. So you don't need programming skills, you don't need Solidity developers, you just can enable that directly. And then the fourth pillar is that all of this is fully what we call fractal. And that means that if you have an ID, let's say it's JD at or Mocca at, right, that you can issue, just like Verus, your own public blockchain, your own community currency, your own tokens, your own branded currency, whatever, even a mapped currency, which can be mapped to Ethereum even. You can do that all yourself, but most importantly, you can be your own public blockchain, which means that you get all the benefits of the mining and staking, you get all the benefits of an ID system, so that you could have sub-IDs, so you could have, if you were an artist and you wanted to create sub-IDs for your different work or for your different projects, if you're multi-talented artist and you're doing, videos, and you're doing albums, and you're doing artwork, and you're doing clothing, you can have effectively sub-ID infrastructure that enables you to create those sub-IDs and then create tokens for them, and to enable you to issue IDs to your members, so that you could have .jd IDs, and those can act as membership tools, etc. So it's a fully nested system that enables everybody to use the software and everybody to harness all the power of it. So it's a multi-currency, multi-chain blockchain infrastructure. This is insanely powerful, and it empowers everybody, because you don't have a single currency like Ethereum or Bitcoin. Is you have a multi-currency that is essentially what enables you to scale the network. So you can think of it just like corporations, right? If you work for a corporation like Nike, and then you decide, oh, I want to set up my own shoe company, there's nothing stopping you going and registering a company in Delaware, registering it, wherever you register it, and that you want to set up your own company and you want to set up your own shoe brand. But there's nothing, the idea of corporations is not unique to Nike or Adidas or whatever. Anyone can set up a corporation, and that's what empowers capitalism to grow, is that you have the right to set up a corporation and be in business. Well, what Verus enables is anybody can set up a public blockchain, and if you have enough followers and if you have enough energy in your network, you too have the ability to offer your users economic incentives to set up IDs, economic incentives to use their computers or to use their money to mine and stake. And you can, the other thing about Verus is you can merge mine up to 22 chains, which means that, with the same hash, you can merge mine 22 of your favorite brands for your favorite influencers or your favorite metaverse properties or whatever it might be. And so you have this fully what we call fractional reserve capability. And that's the other thing, is that we have full DeFi as well. So you can have liquidity pools as well, that you could say, okay, well, we're going to make our currency not just speculative, we are actually going to have a reserve of value. And you can take your Bitcoin and you could create, say, like a 50% reserve, and you could choose to make it a multi-currency reserve. And you could say, we'll be willing to take Bitcoin, we'll be willing to take Ethereum, we'll be willing to take Verus, we'll be willing to take USDC, and we're going to make it a 50% reserve. So that is to say that the value of our liquidity pool, that's going to be the JD pool or the Mocca pool, is at least worth the 50% reserve of other currencies that people have put into it to support this new network. And that capability means that you don't have to try and just, and you can't rug pull anyone in that situation. You can't just run away with the funds. Those funds are, within the liquidity basket or within the public blockchain currency that you launched as a basket. And that then everybody knows that there's a baseline of value, and that enables you to create a bootstrap, so that if you do allocate the founding team, let's say, 10 or 15 or 20% of the tokens, there's some starting value to bootstrap the network. So you've got a bootstrap, you've got a Kickstarter, and you've got a flywheel that can get you going. And the final piece, so that's the 4 pillars of Verus. And then the final piece is that we also have a true root cryptographic bridge to Ethereum that enables you to bring across that bridge any of the value that you have currently in 721s or 7 ERC20 tokens, and all of the liquidity that is available to Ethereum is available in this ecosystem. So that's as quickly as I can tell you what is a relatively massive project.
Wow, that is a massive project with a lot of intricacies intertwined, and I can tell that it was thoroughly thought out from top to bottom. But I did tune into your clubhouse earlier today, and I heard you speaking of how people tend to prostitute themselves for the dream of others. Can you elaborate on that for our audience? I know it's like a complete shift from
Yeah, sure.
versus.
Yeah,
There.
sure. So what really inspired me to work on Verus was this sort of basic idea that, if you look at my pin tweet, is called consilience. And consilience is a word that basically means the unity of knowledge. And so what I'm afraid of is that Google and Facebook and Apple are going to own the unity of knowledge. And that is extremely frightening, because basically it means that we'll always be enslaved to the technocracy. And whether that technocracy is, you think, are good people or bad people, essentially, it doesn't really matter, because you won't have any freedom and you won't be able to compete with them. So they're really just a proxy for, if it's China, who have this idea called social credit system. So the Chinese control all of the technology that their citizens use, right? So if you use WeChat during COVID is a good example, that if you tried to leave Wuhan, your money didn't work when you went outside of the Wuhan province. You couldn't buy gas to power your car. You couldn't stay in a hotel. you couldn't buy groceries, and you were sent back to Wuhan. Now, that's state surveillance. That's the surveillance, what was known as surveillance capitalism. And there was a great book written by a woman called Shoshana Zuboff called Surveillance Capitalism. And well, that's the surveillance state. Where we live is in a world of surveillance capitalism. And that's where your ID, your Apple ID, your Google ID, is notionally yours, but you have no privacy under the Constitution where you disclose information to third parties. It's called the third party doctrine. That means that when you put information on your devices, you are really not private at all, and you don't have any expectation of privacy, or you shouldn't have any expectation of privacy when you disclose information to third parties. Those third parties, whether it's your bank, whether it's your technology provider, whether it's your cloud provider, all have, if will and have the ability to give up that information to the government. And the government, whilst you may like them today, you may not like them tomorrow. And the government can change rapidly, and you could find yourself being deplatformed from life, essentially. And so the basic idea of consilience is that we, the people, should own the unity of knowledge. We should have the right to contribute our data privately to enable us to own the means of production, shall we say, or our consciousness. And so the idea that stems from this idea of the unity of knowledge is that within ourselves as humans, we need to be self-sovereign. That means we need to be in charge of all of our data, because information is life, right? Everything that we do, like I'm sharing information with you now, and you are hearing that information, and we're using Twitter, and Twitter has the right to deplatform me if they don't like what I'm saying, and then I would lose the ability to share that information with you. Now, that obviously is fine. They're a corporation. They have rules. If I was to break the rules, they're allowed to deplatform me. But I would like to see a world where we are able to speak freely and to express opinions. And people may not agree with those opinions, but we can come to consensus as public, as people, about what we deem to be right and wrong, which is how we came to the point we are today, where we have a constitution, where we have separation of powers, and that those powers, unfortunately, are being abused. And we need to find a way to not only be self-sovereign, we need to be conscious, what we call conscious agents. That is to say that we need to be aware of the fact that our perceptions, the way we receive information, whether it's through our eyes, our ears, or any of our five senses, our taste, our smell, or our sense of touch, we need to be able to own our own perceptions, and we need to make sure that we, if our perceptions control our behaviors, right? So if we have misperceptions, then we're going to have misbehaviors. And we have been manipulated by people who control our perceptions over many, many years. And in the old days, it was, you only had I grew up in England, we had 3 television channels, and it was very easy for the government and the media to control the perceptions of its citizens. And then the internet came along and democratized information, but because that information had a cost of being published and a cost of being created, the powers that be, the people that invest in VCs and investors, had to come up with a business model for the internet, because they can't give away the services. You get free email, free all these free services, free maps, free this, free that. Well, it's not really free, because you are the product. Your ID is giving away lots of information about all the things you do, all of your browsing history, all of what you bought, all of what you said, all of what you wrote, all of your social profile, all of your medical profile, all of your financial profile is all being, cohered into a repository of information, into a database of information that is owned by the surveillance capitalists, the technology companies that you have your ID with. And for me, that is unacceptable. And so, we need to own our consciousness, and we need to have a digital declaration of independence that we should have a human right to own our own digital identity, because everything that we do in our life is already all digitally stored and we don't own any of it at all.
Yeah.
And so this is unacceptable, in my opinion. And this is the aim of the Verus project, is to enable humans to own their self-sovereign conscious agency. And this will take, as long as the internet took to get to here, this will take us, probably the next 20 or 30 years. But imagine a world where we own our data, we can share it with each other privately, and we can use public AI to make us all superpowered, to have insights into each other so that we can eradicate misinformation and disinformation and prejudice and bias, and that we can have a world where we can trust each other by verifying, that I am accurate in what I'm saying, I am telling the truth, but I don't have to give up any of my information into a central database. I can use what we call zero knowledge proofs that we have built into Verus, that was called ZK snarks, that gives us the ability to prove everything that I told you, right? Anything that I've said, I can prove to you in a way that doesn't compromise my privacy, but gives you the ability to verify and then trust me. And think how quickly we'll be able to build relationships and to build together when we know that people aren't liars and bullshitters and, thieves and rug pullers and et cetera, et cetera. So that's self-sovereign conscious agency, as quickly as I can explain that.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with everything you said, Nick. And I think if someone would have asked me to define technocracy before today, I would have had a hard time struggling with that. So I appreciate the insight on the importance of owning, what we can own and what we should own. But switching gears a little bit, we've read it ourselves here in Neighborhood Talk and Neighborhood Tales. But you talked about a little bit about the $92 billion in private equity that you raised for a variety of companies. Can you tell us about that journey and maybe even some obstacles that came about with that?
So, like everything in life, I mean, it sounds a lot more glamorous or a lot more, impressive than it really is. So my journey was, I grew up in London, and I was just trying to optimize for, I grew up in a sort of like middle class family with my parents didn't go to university, for example, and so I was the first family to go to university. And when I left university, I was very interested in. I went to university to do law and economics and it was called land economics and real estate basically. And I was very interested in how you could unitize real estate, and that was really where my brain was at as an undergraduate. And I was going to go and work for a real estate company. And this friend of mine, a Kenyan friend of mine, actually told me about this company called Merrill Lynch, and I never even heard of an investment bank, at that point in my life. And he said to me, I said, and how did you get this job, and how much are they paying you? And he was like, I don't know what he said. He was a starting salary, and this is in 1994, right? So this is a long time ago. And he was like, well, the starting salary for graduates was like, I don't know, £50,000, which was probably like $75,000 at the time. And I was like, oh my God, I was going to get in this real estate job something like £20,000 or something. And I was like, that sounds like an amazing job. I'm like, how do I get one of those jobs? Like, really, I was so naive. I was like, all I was trying to do was solve for, trying to get out of the, what I call the trauma loop, right? The trauma loop is
Yeah.
living paycheck to paycheck, right? And so I was like looking at that and saying, how do I escape that world, and how do I get to financial freedom? And this friend, who's called Ikenna, was actually my sister's friend, and I was like, that sounds awesome. And so I did a little bit of reading up, and I sent a whole bunch of CVs out, and I didn't realize these were the hardest jobs to get in the entire world. And I made this very embarrassing CV with a picture of myself on the front. It was ridiculous, but it was. I still have the pictures. I still have one copy of it because it was so embarrassing. But it attracted this when I sent it, because it was the only one with this embarrassing picture of me on the front, and I bound it myself, and the whole thing was just cringeworthy. But it did the job, because perceptions do control behaviors, and it was I did a decent job at making it look nice, but it was these guys picked it up at this bank called Robert Fleming, and this was at the beginning. This is 1994, and this is the beginning of when markets went digital. And so I got this job, and I went to go and get this job. I was interviewing. I got to finals with Morgan Stanley, and I got the final interviews with Robert Fleming. And in this interview, this guy said to me, "Oh well, we'll." Who are you in with? And I was like, well, I'm in the final group at Morgan Stanley. He's good. Look, we'll offer you. What are they offering? And I didn't know what they were offering. I just made up a number. I was like, like what Ikenna had told me. And so, I like £45,000 or something like that. And they go, well, we'll match whatever Morgan Stanley, because Morgan Stanley were like the biggest, they were like Goldman in those days, right? The biggest, and everyone was like, they were the white shoe firm, and so they said, well, if you agree to join us, then we'll give you what they're getting, and you're getting there and whatever. I was like, great, okay. I was like so naive. I was like, better a bird in the hand's worth two in the bush type of thing. And so I was like, okay, I'll join you guys, and I joined them, and I started off on the origination desk, which was like writing endless proposals and pitches, and it was the first time I'd ever used really a computer, and I saw this guy in the room who was called Alex, and he seemed to have the greatest job. He was on the phone all day long. I was like writing his presentations the whole time. I was like, this is a shit job. Like, it doesn't matter how much money they pay me. This is like boring. And he was on the phone the whole time, and he was walking around, and he was on the trading floor, and he was on the talking to all the sales guys. And I was like, oh, I really fancy myself, would like to be doing his job. But like, there was only him, and he had an assistant. And so I was like, I'm going to buy it. And he used to get in very early in the morning. And so I thought, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to buy him breakfast every morning. I went and I said to him, well, what do you like to eat in the morning? He goes, I like a tea, and I like a bacon and egg sandwich from the place down there. Let me buy you breakfast every morning. And if I'll buy you breakfast if you teach me what you're doing. And I just used to sit with him and drive him insane with questions, like insane. Every day buying breakfast, asking questions. Well, what are you doing with that? What are you doing with this? Who are you talking to? What are you doing? Like the whole time. And about 6 months went by of doing this. And one day, in the old days, used to go to the pub after work with all the people you work with. It was very sociable. And so I was down in the pub, and I got called back up to the office, and I was told, you've got to be in tomorrow morning at like 6 a.m. I was like, oh no, they're going to fire me, because I was always mucking around and playing jokes on people, and like just being I was the only undergraduate they'd hired. Everyone else was MBAs. I was the only undergraduate in the history of that group that they'd hired. So I was a bit, immature. And so they said to me, oh, come in tomorrow at 6 a.m. I was like, oh, fuck, they're going to fire me. So, so I turn up at 6 a.m. in the morning, and there's the owner of the bank, and there's my boss, and there's the CEO. And I'm like, oh my Lord, they really are going to fire me. And I was 21, 21, 22. And they say to me, so Nick, Alex has resigned, and he's going to work at this other bank, and he's going to be the head of their capital markets business. I was like, oh, this doesn't sound good. And they said, and, we asked him, who in the city do you think can do your job, or in the department can do your job. And he said, well, the only person that knows every single thing about what I do is Nick, because he's been driving me mad every day, buying me breakfast and asking me questions. And so we've decided that as long as you don't tell anyone how old you are, because you look older than than you really are, then you are going to be the new head of syndicate for the bank. I'm like 21 years old. I know nothing about nothing, right? And they go, so congratulations, you're the new head of syndicate for Robert Fleming. And I'm like, oh my God, So I go, I sit at the desk. Now I'm at the top of the desk, and basically I realized that like everything, perception does control behavior, and if you put it out there, you'll get it back. And I end up running the desk, and we were sitting, and it was like pure luck. The equity capital markets went crazy from the 1990s, when America was going through the tech boom. We were bringing all of the companies from all over the world, were raising money in London and also raising money in New York. And basically there was one or two guys, and actually there was me and actually a girl, and the two of us, Mary, her name was, and the two of us ended up running all of the IPO business, would run through me and her, and the boss of that business was the boss of capital markets. And because there were only this few number of seats on the, and then there were these trading floors full of sales guys and traders, my job was to run the deals and brief the companies and really run the computer. That was the other thing that was happening at that time, is that we were going through, the beginning of computers. And so a lot of these people were very old, and they didn't, they were much older, and they didn't know how to run the computer. And, it was a database, and you had to, you were slicing and dicing all the information, just like what we're going through now again, so that you could be able to brief the company that was issuing the equity, who was issuing the stock. And so they basically, it was just like really just a database, but it worked on keystrokes. So it made it that like you had to know what to do in order to be able to cut the information up. And so I ended up being like at the choke point of all the information on the deal. And I ended up running, the privatization of the Indian telco company called VSNL. And then I was sent to Indonesia, and I lived in Indonesia, and the same bizarre series of events happened where I ended up running this $6 billion deal because I was running the computer out of the Grand Hyatt in Jakarta, and the Prime Minister asked me to come. And it was on a phone call, and there was Goldman was saying, "Oh, you can't, you have to come to New York." And I was like, actually, I'm sitting in the Grand Hyatt Jakarta just down the road. And he goes, "Pack your computer, you're coming to work in my office." And I then worked next to the Prime Minister with the whole of the privatization book, and everyone went crazy at me. And then when I came back from that, it was like such a big deal that my bosses were like, "Oh, now you're like, really, you did such a great job, and we made so much money, and blah blah blah." And so it was just like this whole series of events that was really just trying super hard to get out of where I was at, and being willing to be make just put it out there. And each time just these bizarre things would happen that would just be like pure luck combined with a lot of just being young, I suppose, and not being afraid, and just taking these risks and putting my hand up and saying, actually, I've got the book and I can do this, and I'll come over there, and then it sort of you get a snowball that starts to build. And then our desk, because we were a big bank, would be involved in every deal. So that's why you get to say, oh well, I did do genuinely did do $92 billion of equities business. Nothing to do with me. It was just I happened to be occupying one of, maybe there were 10 seats in the entire city, that there was a guy who was responsible for that business. So it was not really anything to do with me, but it was to do with being lucky and being willing to take risks, and then just going with it, just going with it every time. And so that was really the story. And so we just did loads of business,
Yeah.
And then you move to the next thing and the next thing, and the next thing was private equity. So I went from public markets to private markets, and then that was the next big wave, and then you jump on that wave. And so the public markets were the big wave of the 90s. Private markets have been the big wave of the early 2000s, of the noughts. And now the blockchain is the next big wave in financial innovation. But each of those times, I was really just a toothpick on the wave. And this time, you know, trying to be more, instead of being part of the Google IPO, I would rather be, the next level up, and trying to be part of a community that's trying to build the next big innovation in the world, and trying to make it so that that innovation will benefit everyone. Because I also realized through my own journey of consciousness and my own journey getting out of the trauma, that it's almost impossible for people to escape the trauma loop now, because the amount of money you need, and you need to go and basically prostitute yourself, in front of VCs, and they're never going to back, you know, they back a certain type of person. They wouldn't back someone like me because I'm too old, and they won't back, other, people for other prejudicial reasons. Or they say all this stuff, but they're just, quite frankly, fucking liars. And so I just wanted to be involved in building a system that would give everybody who's got the willingness, like, to put it out there and take risk, and be honest, and and do all the things that I didn't even really think about this till you asked me the question, but do the things that I was willing to do, which was just be willing to embarrass yourself by putting a picture on the front, and
Yeah.
put yourself forward, and not need to go and do it somebody else's way. Like, just believe in yourself. Actually, that's something when I watched Genius, about Kanye, it really struck me about the way that he came up. Was like, he was so willing to expose his frailties. In the beginning of the documentary, you see how he was going around with the cameraman. I can't remember his name, but I spoke to him. And like, do those sorts of things. Like, you could see that he was going to be successful because he was willing to do anything, and to really, even at the risk of looking a bit sort of cringy, like, to take those risks. And look at him now. What an amazing success story. So but you need an infrastructure to do that, because you can't succeed in the Web 2 world without playing the game their way. And so the idea of Web 3, and the idea of the financial innovation, and the idea of building a system that doesn't require millions of dollars of developer money is an attractive idea to me. And I'm just a member of this community. I mean, it's just about everybody rowing together and trying to build something that enables that type of opportunity. Like, America enabled opportunity, but now it doesn't enable opportunity, because you can't succeed without going through these channels that are not open to everybody by any means.
Oh, that's a great perspective. So one of my other questions for you is, well, I know how this is okay. So I'm just gonna ask this one. Let's talk about quantum computing, because I see that Verus is quantum resistant. Like, how is that
Uh-huh.
possible?
So, so yeah, that's a good question. So, Verus is quantum ready, but not yet quantum resistant, because we haven't yet adopted, and NIST hasn't yet settled on the algorithm for that they approve for quantum resistance. So it is quantum ready, and the way that it is quantum ready is through the algorithm that it's using. That's called the Hiraka. Well, it's actually evolved from the original, but the original algorithm is called the Hiraka 512 algorithm, and that enables once a final signature um, is arrived upon, which, for example, could be one of the candidates would be Falcon 512 is one of the candidates for quantum resistant signatures, would enable us to be reverse compatible and quantum resistant. So whilst I don't believe that we are going to be at risk of a quantum attack within the next 18 months, I do think, or 18 to 36 months even maybe, I
Wow,
do
that
think that,
quickly?
I do think that there will be well, we know that Google and NASA achieved quantum, I don't know what they called it, whether they called it quantum supremacy, and the Chinese achieved quantum supremacy. I suspect that there will be a quantum computer sooner than people think. I
Yeah.
think that's a general thought. And that there are two risks to a quantum computer. One, that it could outperform any other miner, which is one risk, and therefore take over a chain, for example, or that it could break the signatures. But this has already been discussed. In terms of Schnorr signatures or Shor signatures. I can't remember the Shor algorithm in respect of Bitcoin, and that there is a way that Bitcoin can upgrade as well to this if it can come to consensus on the upgrade. So I don't see that being really a major threat, even when they do achieve quantum supremacy or a quantum computer. But I think that the real target of a quantum computer will not be Bitcoin or will not be a public blockchain necessarily, but I think it will be the traditional banking system, because you can well imagine what chaos would be sown if you could essentially attack everybody's bank account. And so the reason why I think people should be excited and should be interested in a technology like Verus, which is quantum ready and will be quantum resistant as soon as we, as a NIST and everybody else, agrees to what is the best algorithm for the signatures, etc. Then I think that having that capability within one's technology will mean that it will be clear that keeping your money in a system like Verus will be more secure than keeping your money in the bank. And I think that's the real risk. And there were, there have been attacks on the banking system previously that have been referred to as software upgrade problems, but were state-based attacks that were designed to threaten the banking system. And we know that those were committed by the Russians in this particular case that I'm thinking of, against an Irish bank that it went underreported, but it was pretty clear that this was a nation state attack on a relatively small bank, but it had about 600,000 clients who defaulted on their mortgages, whose credit card bills were all upside down, and because they had to, effectively go and sort of go back and try to recalibrate the resources of that bank and who'd spent what, etc., it made it very clear to me that the likely use of a state-based quantum computer would be to attack the traditional financial system, which has, on a relative basis, terrible security compared to the new technologies that will be with us sooner than later. So yeah, and if I was Putin, that's what I'd be doing. Imagine if you scrambled all of the accounts at J.P. Morgan Chase. I mean, just think what that would do to the economy.
Yeah.
It would just be disastrous. And so, it is clear that if I was North Korea, if you were Putin, if you really wanted to take on the system, that's where you would attack. You wouldn't attack a blockchain. It would be a relatively low impact at this point in time.
Yeah, because blockchain isn't necessarily implemented across the board in every enterprise industry, well, industry enterprise, if I'm saying it
Exactly.
correctly. So
Exactly. Whereas
it
the
just
banking
wouldn't make
system
sense.
is central to everything.
Yeah, and it's already like tried and true. And only thing I do is just hack about five of them. You're good. Just
Right.
don't get traced.
Just, just the money center. It doesn't matter if you were get traced or not. I mean, the fingerprints would be absolutely, obvious who was doing it, but it would be so disruptive. I mean, this is what's going on right now. Let's be clear. The sanctioning of the Russians for the Ukrainian invasion has pushed the Russians into the hands of the Chinese, who have every desire to take over and to take on the dollar, what's known as the dollar hegemony, which is the power of the dollar is the power of America is the dollar, not its economy. It's the fact that the dollar prices everything pretty much in the world. It prices all the commodities, all of the oil, all of the inputs into the modern economy. And so that is what, the powers who would like, to resist the American world are taking on at the moment. And so you can see in the non-compliance of the Chinese with the sanctions by buying Russian oil, and the Indian community, which has also been less than compliant with the sanctions, has created this new dimension where, the Russians have made it very clear that we are in a new multipolar world, and that they're backing the Chinese, and this is causing some discomfort to the American government, and is part of this new, like, I was telling you before, it's like there's eras, like we're in a new era, and you should think of it as what used to be what they used to call Chimerica, China and America, is now, much clearer to be Chusha, China and Russia, than it is Chimerica. And that's why we had the $53 billion chips bill that was just pushed through, because we need to be sovereign in our technology business. And this is the process where we bring all of these key industries back to onshore in, America and in Europe. And, the era of globalization, which was fueled by low inflation, or let's call it lowflation, and was fueled by this, the growth of, allowing China to grow and basically subsidize our inflationary, capital structure, our banking business. So, there is a massive, massive change that we're living within. It's not just, oh, what's happening with the blockchain? No, this is the entire system is shifting, just like we had, an era post Bretton Woods, just as we had an era in as the capital markets just around 94, 95, when computers came in place. We had a world of globalization. Now we're moving into a new era of a multipolar world where you have a country that is basically a state surveillance architecture, people that don't have agency because they are completely subjected to the whims of their government. And then we have America and Europe and the Western, what we call the Western liberal democratic world, which, is supposed to be about democracy and freedom. And that world is under threat as well, because basically, K Street and the lobbyists run our modern world, and they write the laws, and and they basically, lobby and spend billions of dollars, and they get to write the laws, and then they get to influence the politicians. And those politicians influence who our lawmakers are, and those lawmakers, electoral college decides who wins the elections. And our democracy is right at that point where we need new technologies that are going to bring in this, ability for humans to hopefully protect our self-sovereignty and show that the difference between what we can do in Western liberal democratic countries is a viable alternative to state surveillance. And so, we need these technologies. We need technologies like Verus. And by the way, I would support a technology that wasn't Verus. I mean, I'm not, Bitcoin is is like the light bulb, is like is that amazing leap forward where you move from burning fuel to using electricity. Bitcoin is the same as that, light bulb moment, but that's just mathematics, and we have to take that mathematics and then apply it to what is the most important innovation of our age, which is the internet. And the internet needs to be a public infrastructure, not a private infrastructure. At the moment, there are private internets. There's the Chinese internet, the Russian internet, the Middle Eastern internet. You ever go to the UAE or Dubai or anywhere, you try and go and watch make a WhatsApp call or a YouTube video, like you don't have access to that, right? So,
Right.
the American internet is owned by corporations, subject to the oversight of the government. Now, we need an open internet so that we can unite as humans, because the average Russian doesn't hate the average Ukrainian. The average Chinaman doesn't hate the American. The average American doesn't hate, this is all narrative that has been sown through control of the perceptions of the people. And those perceptions come through the digital channel. That's why they control it. That's why you have the Great Firewall of China. Well, how are we going to change the world if that is set in stone? How are we going to unite as people? That's what meta really means. It's not fucking meta, bloody Zuckerberg's meta. It means that we're
I
meta
agree.
to the macro and the micro. We are all the same. We are 99% similar. We are very little that is different, except the ideas that have been created to separate us. And that is what it means. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Well, we have to get that self-evident truth back, and we can only do that with systems like Verus. And there will be other innovators, and there will be other innovations, but they have to be owned by and for the people. They cannot be founded by these. They cannot be like Solana or AVAX or Avalon. They cannot be. Those technologies are the same as Google, and and the same with Ethereum. It's centralized. It's owned and controlled by a small group of people that got allocated free tokens for being, that, all of this stuff is just the same as being in a company. Look at how much, Jeff Bezos owns of Amazon, right? It's like 16% odd, right? This is.
Yeah. I want to, just wrap up with one last question regarding on this portion of our show. In reference to, Verus, right? And you talking about bringing people together. I fully believe in that, but being a product of the neighborhood, right? And our culture is really important to me for our culture and for, people of color to understand how to capitalize from a product. And I believe that Verus can be a solution, but I want to hear from you. Do you think that our culture would
Absolutely.
would,
It is the only solution, because the beauty of Verus is that it is not owned by, there's no VCs, there's no ICO, there was no, it was all fair launched and fair mined. That's number one. So it doesn't have any of the preconditions of other chains like Ethereum or Avalanche or Solana or any of that, right? So that's number one. Number two is that because it's a fractal design, that if you buy an ID, when the final pieces go to mainnet, which is we're at release candidate 2, and it's really right there, you can just buy an ID and you get all of the software so that you can launch your own public blockchain, which you can design to be, however you want it to be designed. You get all of the software for free. There's hardly, sorry, it's free open source software, so you can fork it and you can take it and you can use it, of course, etc., etc. There is, if you want to buy an ID, it costs you 100 Verus. Well, Verus is trading at, I don't know, like 30 cents or something. I really don't check the price very often, but that's like saying that for 100 Verus, and you can even get it down to 20 Verus if you do it with a referral ID. But let's say it's 100 Verus, so it's 100 Verus times 30 cents, right? So it's costing you next to nothing, right, to buy an ID. And then once you have an ID, you can launch a public blockchain which has all of the software, all of the ID technology, all of the decentralized exchange, all of the basket, all of the DeFi, everything for, I think the current price for a public blockchain is 10,000 Verus. So it would be, to do a whole project, 30 cents times 10,000. So what's that? $3,000.
Mm-hmm.
So compare that to launching a blockchain. It costs you millions and millions to launch your own public blockchain in any other way. So you can think of Verus as a much more powerful, but it's much more like a Shopify or a Wix but those are obviously applications. They're not protocols, but I'm just saying as an idea, right? It's much more like a WordPress type of thing, where you don't need to have any programming. Of course, you're going to need developers if you want to be your own public blockchain, but essentially, it's cutting out all of the barriers for a fairer way for people to proceed, and to, if you have a good lead developer, I've spoken to Chiz about this, of course, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to be able to launch your own public blockchain, and you don't need to be a multimillionaire. You just need to have a few thousand dollars to be able to harness all this power, and then it's your community, and you're interoperable with immediately with all of the Ethereum infrastructure, and you have complete security and self-sovereignty. So I couldn't think of a better way to empower people, especially people who've traditionally been alienated from the levels of power.
I love the explanation that you just given us. So I would like to thank you for those great interview questions and how in depth you went. Very great information. But to go on to the next part of our neighborhood talk, there's something called Cap or Facts. Now, Cap or Fact is basically true or not true, and then you tell us your reasoning as to why. So, so our question for Cap or Fact is self-sovereignty is the most important thing an individual can possess.
True. If you're not self-sovereign, you're controlled by somebody else, and nobody wants to be controlled by other people. Freedom is essential if you want to express yourself, and we hold these truths to be self-evident.
Great.
All right, I love it. All right, so we'll go one more Cap or Fact question for you, Nick. And the fintech industry will emerge greatly in the meta space. Would you say that's Cap or Facts?
I think that I'm hoping that the fintech industry will be destroyed by the metaverse. So if cap means negative,
that's correct.
Then cap.
Yeah.
I think fintech is just basically lead generation for the existing system, and it is subsidized by the same VCs and the same power structures, and it will not empower humanity. So I do not see. I mean, they are going to succeed. They are going to be successful. But I would rather see the decentralized world replace fintech.
Yeah, 100% agreed.
All right. Well, Nicholas, I would like to thank you for coming on to our space and just letting our audience know, and also bringing some of your people along with you. I see y'all in the audience as well. Um, are there any final words you would like to leave for our listeners, and like how can we all reach you and follow what
Um,
you're doing?
yeah, so you can follow on Twitter, where my profile is value.earth. And you could join the Discord, which is on the website verus.io, and you can the Discord. And my name on the Discord is Consilience, because that is my mission, the unity of knowledge. And so you can connect to me if you want directly by just messaging me in the Discord. And of course, if you know Chiz, you can always reach out to Chiz, and you can send me a DM. My DMs are open on Twitter as well. So yeah, like we're here to empower and to specifically work with communities who are under represented. So this is a part of our mission, including the union movement, which I'm very focused on assisting because I believe that unions understand collective bargaining, and at the end of the day, what is the blockchain but a data union? So that's the working model. So anyone who believes in that type of a mission, we always want to help as part of the public good that we'd like to achieve.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. Nicholas Lyons, lead advisor for Verus. Absolutely a pleasure having you here on our space here at Neighborhood Talk. The knowledge was so in depth. I'm smarter. I'm greater because of it. We appreciate you. But neighbors, we're right back at it this Tuesday, September the 6th, here at Neighborhood Talk. We will have with us the Metaverse influencer, Manny Flizio, joining us, talking everything Metaverse and all of his projects. You don't want to miss it. And you already know our claim to being the newest and latest. We hold that true. Looking forward to giving away $100,000 in cash prizes. All you need to do is be a part of our Discord. Head right over to our Twitter space, our Twitter profile. Click the link in our bio. Join our link. You don't want to miss the exclusive details. That's been all for me. It's been a pleasure. You can find me everywhere at JD Jones and Mocca. Absolutely a pleasure sharing the space with you again.
And likewise, man. So I just want to thank the listeners. Oh, is there anything you want to say, Nicholas?
I just want to say, as it's midnight, or it's midnight here in France, I'm going to love you and leave you. And if anyone, say thank you very much for having me on, and thank you for people listening. And if you need me, then you can always DM me, and I'll be around to help anyone.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a great night's rest and sleep in tomorrow. You did.
Thanks so much. Speak soon. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. But also, you all, I just want to thank the listeners for coming into our space and joining us for episode 9 of Neighborhood Talks. So you can find us at NH Tales on Twitter, and also Neighborhood Tales on every other platform. And I mean, we are everywhere, y'all, like IG, TikTok, Discord, LinkedIn, Facebook. And you can also catch the recordings of Neighborhood Talks on our YouTube channel. And you can find me, Mocha, on the block. You're on Twitter and IG. So it's been a pleasure, y'all. And until next time, we'll see y'all later.
It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood. Would you be mine? Would you be mine? It's a neighborly day